A brother has to pay a bride price that is upwards of 200 heads of cattle. You better believe it. And these are not your ordinary cattle. The cattle in South Sudan, they're huge, man.
I know that so many people are looking for relationships and love, and I've said it time and time again. The ball game is different. Majority of Africans don't have that infatuated, stemming love, affectionate that many of women coming from a Western world are seeking. You are attractive by the money and the potential of getting a green card.
This pertains to the American woman is interested in coming to the continent. This type of woman, her mind is wired differently in general. She's interested in coming to the continent to explore. She's not interested in fulfilling your American dream. You got to let that sink in. And so it's so unfortunate when we find ourselves in relationships where the man is more interested in getting to America.
DIY back in the house. She's an amazing sister. Very great on just getting a hang of the continent, but more specifically Ghana. Hello and welcome to Afrocentric. Here we connect you with the motherland, commentary on all things African that can hopefully celebrate Africa and Africans all over the world, but also help you navigate the continent. And today, a fairly heavy subject, if you wish, marriage. And marriage in Africa is a totally different kettle of fish, I can tell you that. Her experience is something unique, and it's her own journey that she's sharing. So let's listen to her vibe, let's listen to her story, alongside Go Black giving some of his tidbits on the African sister from the West navigating the continent of Africa. And I'm born and raised in Africa. I believe I could also bring something unique to this conversation so that this commentary can help make sense of Africa. You really have to watch this to the end. I think it should be exciting. Heavy topic, but exciting nonetheless to listen to. Check this out.
So anyways, we're looking at people's relationships, and we look at the good qualities, and when you look at an African American relationship and an African relationship, an African man and an African American woman, or a Black American woman, and vice versa for the men, a Black man from the West getting with an African woman or something like that, there's going to be some interesting revelations. Culturally, as an example, your African man may want you to learn to pound fufu or make certain types of traditional soups just based off of that's what he likes, right? It's a hit and miss as far as how flexible that African man or Ghanaian man will be as far as what he demands of you or wants of you, you see? And so in the West, it seems to me that there's more compromises, but here there's more pressure on the society to behave a certain type of way or do certain roles, right? So even if you marry someone in the West and they happen to come from Africa, you'll find yourself in this world of tradition, in this world of you must learn how to do this in order to satisfy your man, that sort of mentality. And so it's been so interesting, especially me, because I've come to a place where it's highly traditional and I am not. But anyways, the point that I'm making here is you'll have a man that say he wants you to learn how to make fufu because he really likes it. It's a part of his culture and makes him feel at home, right? Well, we have to also take into consideration that the Western woman or the American woman has a culture and tradition too. And when you look at where you come from and all of the essences that makes you you, and you attempt to combine them with someone who may not have had that, it could be difficult. Some people, or a lot of people, would just be like, oh my gosh, if a man is the perfect visitor, yes, he's the perfect thing for me. Because we have shaped our life together. You know, he's shaped me in such a way, and I've shaped him in such a way, and it all begins with what? Communication. Because in the beginning, you know, we're talking about people who don't really know one another. We don't know their culture, we don't know their language, we don't really know them. And you can be over there in the West and you really do not understand and know this person. And so what I would recommend for anyone, and I guess this would, you can apply this to any culture, is to actually sit down and say, you know, I really like this thing, or I'm really interested in doing this. It would make me really happy, right? This can be as far as American woman, because I've had this in our group. We have some people that have dealt with this, but guess what? Unfortunately, they didn't make it. This pertains to the American woman is interested in coming to the continent. This type of woman, her mind is wired differently in general. She's interested in coming to the continent to explore. She's not interested in fulfilling your American dream. You got to let that sink in. And so it's so unfortunate when we do, or I'm saying we, but I'm just speaking generally, when we find ourselves in relationships where the man is more interested in getting to America. And if you're already there, that's something that you have to kind of, I guess, either be willing to wait on. If you love them that much, you know, this gets into your personal life, and what type of person you are and what you're willing to do for that person. I find that sometimes we get lost in relationships thinking that we can't maybe find someone else, so therefore you'll sign up for things that are not complementary to your happiness. And overall, if you do find yourself, you know, just hanging out with somebody who's not wanting to do anything collective with you, you have to communicate about it. Else, what are you there for? There must be some common ground. There must be something that holds you together. There must be something there that makes you both, you're both aiming towards this thing. There's a target that you're both aiming at. If you both don't have the same target, I don't really know about that one. I don't really know about that one because there must be something, you know, you must have something in common that will bind you together and keep you together. I know that when you look at tradition here, that's what binds people together, tradition. Religion, roles, social roles. You get married, you have kids. You pay for schooling, pay for deaths, pay for medical expenses. It's very simple, you see? But when you talk about Western ideals, Western traditions, it's extremely vast because many of us are coming from cultures that stems from accessing individuality. And within individuality, you're a flower that's able to bloom in many different directions. And so if you get with someone who has not bloomed in many different directions, you know, it's the equivalent to being unequally yoked. And it's hard out there. So you have these Western women, they come here and there's a common complaint. There's a common complaint, and it has to do with the, you know, many of the I'm not going to speak all Africa, just so you guys know. I can't do that because there's many people who didn't grow up without. There are some cultures that grew up with a lot of money. They're different, so their culture is a little different. Then you have others that had a different type of situation going on. It's very diverse continent of Africa within various tribes. So please forgive me. Don't ever assume that I'm generalizing every African man like this. I'm not. I'm just talking about the Ghanaian experience mainly, although our network, you know, it extends far beyond Ghana. But within Ghana, unfortunately, you know, there is this common conversation that there's a lack of communication, like good communication that helps to understand conflict that helps to understand how to troubleshoot during crisis. And the way that, the African man handles crisis is way different than how an American woman would experience it in the West. They're not going to just let you go and be gone and leaving and all that stuff. They don't, it's not like how it is in the West where people are quick to break up and stuff like that. They may not have the communication like how you're used to, but it's almost like what you're tripping off of or how you feel about something, they may not be aware of that level of thinking, you see? And so it's not as pressing as how you might feel about it as a Westerner. Westerners are kind of a little volatile, when it comes to expressing themselves and their feelings and their emotions and all of those things. When you're coming to societies where they don't deal on that level of emotions and, people marry because they just need somewhere to stay, have a baby, and move forward. It ain't always about how you thinking about it. Being all in love, and you might get that in some, yeah, but we can take a poll and you will see the truth that most people aren't on that level of what you are used to, the emotions. And so with all that high energy and emotion about how you feel, that they're not ready for all of that. They're not used to that. They're not, you see? And so when you bring that, they're very patient. They're very, very patient. Like, wow, what is this? Like, okay. But they don't know how to be like, well, tell me how you feel. You're not going to get that because they may not have the level of information to address you like that as a Western woman. You see, so it's extremely complex, but there's a way to actually look at it and say, oh, okay, they're not as complicated as you.
DIY talks about the differences in brothers and sisters, the African man going to the West, the African sister going to Africa. And it's true. I think one of the biggest challenges that you have is the failure to realize that it is not just love in the concept of the West, with all the frills around it, lovey-dovey, and the good times. Africa, engagement, marriage, in most of rural Africa, that rural community has a way of life, and it defines the individual so that even if they go away, it never really leaves them. It's part of the system. It's defined who they are, so you can't change that. The brother might be chasing life in the West, or green card in America, or this life, this education, or this experience. So if he does not have the mindset to come home, back to Africa, and yet meets a sister who is excited about him being African and is looking forward to going back to Africa with him, and he's not ready for that, immediately that's a conflict. That's a major conflict. And I think to a very large extent, that is a reality that couples do not think about. It's love at first sight, it's the connection, it makes my heart go like this, but really there's got to be other layers to that should you stop using just your feelings and apply a bit of your mind, one realizes that, yes, I'm in love with this person, but what are the realities around that? Am I really ready to move to Africa? Maybe the brother wants to go back home. Are you really ready to move to Africa? Are you really ready to have a home and a presence, or to grow old in Africa? Maybe you're not. Then maybe this brother is not for you. Are you willing to experience Africa in its raw form? Nature, culture, tradition, the rural life, the village, the drawing of water from a well, in some instances, walking certain distances, riding. Not to say that Africa is only about trees and people live in the bush. No. There are cities with great amenities, just like the West, whether you're in Joburg, in Nairobi, in Cairo, in Kinshasa, there are modern facilities that exist. The only question is Africa a place you consider home? If not, you're better off staying in the West. If this brother is happy to live with you in the West, then I think that's a good mix. But we also know that a rite of passage, such as somebody passing on, then sometimes calls for the body of the deceased to be brought back home. We've seen that happen, and that's a common tradition in many African communities, that you are returned back to your family, where you were born, perhaps where you were raised, but likely to what would be regarded as a family cemetery, because the average African does not believe in burying the dead, the loved ones, away from home. Those are some of the differences. So to take somebody to a cemetery is to abandon them in death. So marriage in Africa often is a twin affair, that you've got the religious element to it and you've got the customary element to it. And both of them are anchored in law, so that even if you are married customarily, there will be a record of it, and that can be presented anywhere and would be legally binding. Of course, the use of a document from government would then also offer another level of legitimacy and cover both the couple, so to speak. But customary is one big aspect of it. In many African countries, you have the payment of a bride price. In some instances, you'll have payment of dowry from the lady's family, generally, to the man. That really is dowry. What goes to the lady, the right terminology is bride price. So that may make you think that the sister is up for sale. But in reality, it is a gift to the girl's family for raising this girl. And it also demonstrates that you as a brother are able to take care of their daughter. That is a crucial aspect to understand. Another aspect of marriage in Africa that you must consider is that in many African countries, the whole concept of polygamy still exists. Oh yes, polygamy. And I know our Western sisters frown upon that. But it does exist. And even within Africa, there are those who frown upon it. But a majority of time, it is by choice that somebody chooses to be married to 2 or 3 wives. Whether it is a choice for the women, I can't speak too much to that, because there's always the first one to arrive, which in certain tribes is called Mikai, which means she is the anchor of the family. She's the first wife, she's the first woman. And that position is never lost. Whatever happens to that lady, in many of those cultures that practice that, she never loses that pole position, that she is regarded as the matriarch of the family. Now, in terms of bride price, again, based on where you go to certain communities, and you will find that, for example, in South Sudan, there are tribes there like the Dinka, where to get a girl that you would actually refer to as your wife would mean that for the typical thing that Africans use, which is animals as a bride price, that a brother has to pay a bride price that is upwards of 200 heads of cattle. But it's a communal affair. So when the brother is getting married, relatives on the father's side, uncles, they contribute. You give me 5 bulls, you give me 10 bulls, you give me 20. So ultimately, the total could be 200, could be 100, could be 300. And I've been to South Sudan myself a number of times. And wonderful country, wonderful people, some of the tallest people you'll have in the world. If you remember the NBA player called Manute Bol was from South Sudan. So culture, tradition is deeply rooted in Africa when it comes to marriage. And that is something that one has to be very cognizant of.
I know that so many people are looking for relationships and love, and I've said it time and time again. The ball game is different. Majority of Africans don't have that infatuated, stemming love, affectionate that many of women coming from a Western world are seeking. You are attractive by the money and the potential of getting a green card. I'm just going to say that. I have met several African American women who will even go as far as claiming that the guy is their husband. She refers to him as husband, or they got married with no validity of paperwork, no weddings, no nothing. Like many of my videos, sisters, be careful. And even the younger sisters. Though you might think that you found love in the most impossible places, I'll share with you that love is very short-lived, because you ask majority of Africans what love is, you're gonna find their definition is totally different than yours. Where most women seek affection, they want to be pampered, they want to be, listened to, and sometimes they want to, have the control because of being in the financial state that they are in, and maybe have a vision for their life. The man typically is going to take the back seat.
Now, Go Black oftentimes is about safety for the black sisters on the continent. And like he says it, you either take it or you just shove it aside. And unfortunately, he's referring to the passing of another sister recently in Ghana. And not to hate on Ghana. And we know these things happen also in the West, America included. In fact, femicide is quite prevalent in the US and is not something that can be regarded as an occurrence that only happens in Africa. That said, Go Black's thing is sisters have got to be safe. You've got to know what you want, but you also have got to know the differences in terms of what constitutes marriage in Africa. Recently, Africa just got one of its youngest elected presidents, not the youngest, but youngest elected presidents, Bassirou Diomaye Faye of Senegal. And for those of you who watch news, President Diomaye Faye is actually married to 2 wives. So one will work for somebody else, it might not work for another person. So you have got to choose what works for you. But ultimately, marriage in Africa is not for every other black person who's coming from abroad. The West and its pressure on society, and especially the black folk, has compelled our sisters, even the brothers, to be fairly aggressive and to stand their ground. That has been ingrained based on a culture, a socialization where you've got to fend off aggressiveness from a socio-political system that is against the African person. Then obviously the end result is brothers who are fairly aggressive, who are quick to fight in resolving a conflict, and sisters who will stand their ground, who will, be all that. Culture will be a major source of conflict because there are differences that obviously border on the individual in society. So really, there's pros and cons about all these things. You will have to pick what works for you. Do you dig tradition? Do you feel it? Do you want to try it out? Can you go the whole hog? The thing that surprises me though is that Some of the Western women, especially the European kind, deliberately settle down in some of the most rural of places, make a life and raise children. I have never understood that. Listen, if you are one of those people, please tell us how that works. I don't know. But I don't know if it's just a sense of adventure that drives the average European person. I don't know. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. But obviously, marriage is what defines family in many instances. So let's share experiences and what can we learn from each other. Above all, we choose to be Afrocentric. We celebrate the fact that we are African. And bits of that, even for those who are out in the West, have followed you. The traditions that have followed you, that have stayed with you, around food, around music, around dance. Please share in the comments. And I want to say thank you for finding time to return if you're returning. And if you've clicked for the first time, many thanks. Welcome to Afrocentric. Please like, subscribe, and let's build the tribe of Africa that can be proud and can help connect the rest of the diaspora. This is Afrocentric, and we'll see you in the next video. I'm out.